If you walk along the docks of Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, you will see workers assembling the most advanced warships on Earth, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers that cost $13 billion each, submarines capable of staying underwater for months. The cranes tower over the water, the welding sparks light up the night shift. But if you look just a few hundred yards down the same coastline, past the security gates and the naval vessels, you will find something that doesn't exist anymore. A berth where commercial cargo ships used to be built. The last major commercial cargo vessel constructed in an American shipyard for international trade was delivered in 2010. Since then, nothing. Not a single ocean-going container ship, not a bulk carrier, not a tanker. The United States, the country that pioneered modern shipbuilding, that launched the Liberty ships during World War II at a rate of 3 per day, cannot build a single cargo ship anymore. And it's not because American workers forgot how to weld steel. So it raises obvious questions. How did the world's largest economy lose the ability to build the very ships that carry its imports and exports? Why do ships flying American flags get built in South Korea, Japan, and China? The answer isn't just about cheaper labor overseas, though that plays a part. The answer lies in a perfect storm of protectionist laws, global economics, and a strategic choice made decades ago that has left the American maritime industry in a state of managed decline. This is the story of how America went from building the world's merchant fleet to building almost none of it, and why even throwing billions of dollars at the problem won't bring it back. Originally, the United States dominated global shipbuilding. During World War II, American yards produced over 2,700 Liberty ships, the cargo workhorses that supplied the Allied war effort. They were ugly, simple, and effective. After the war, that industrial capacity didn't disappear. It converted. American shipyards in places like Newport News, Bath, and San Diego built commercial tankers, cargo liners, and passenger ships for the booming post-war economy. But the center of gravity was already shifting. In the 1960s, Japan emerged as the shipbuilding giant. They had newer yards, more efficient processes, and crucially, government subsidies that allowed them to underbid American competitors. By the 1970s, South Korea entered the game using the same playbook: massive state investment, cheap labor, and economies of scale. Then, in the 1990s and 2000s, China arrived and swallowed the entire market whole. Today, China builds roughly 50% of the world's commercial ships by tonnage. South Korea builds about 28%. Japan holds around 18%. The United States? Less than 0.3%. And that sliver is almost entirely military vessels, or small specialized craft protected by law. It's easy to look at this timeline and assume it's just another case of offshoring, but that isn't the whole picture. There is a law, and it's called the Jones Act. Officially known as the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, the Jones Act mandates that any ship carrying cargo between two U.S. ports must be built in the United States, owned by U.S. citizens, flagged under the U.S. flag, and crewed by American sailors. The stated purpose was to maintain a domestic shipbuilding industry and ensure a ready supply of ships and sailors in times of war. But here's the unintended consequence. The law created a captive market with no competition. If you want to ship oil from Texas to New Jersey by sea, you must use a Jones Act compliant vessel. That vessel must be built in America, where shipbuilding costs are 3 to 5 times higher than in South Korea. So, companies simply avoid it. They use trucks, trains, or pipelines instead. The domestic shipping market that the Jones Act was designed to protect has shrunk to almost nothing. Meanwhile, international shipping, the real volume, the container ships moving goods from Shanghai to Los Angeles, has no such requirement. Those ships are built wherever it's cheapest, and American yards can't compete. To understand the cost problem, you need to look at the raw economics. A modern 14,000 TEU container ship costs roughly $140 million to build in South Korea. The same ship, if it could even be built in the United States, would cost an estimated $400 million to $500 million. That's not a 10% premium. That's a multiple. Why? Labor costs are part of it. An American shipyard welder earns $60,000 to $90,000 per year plus benefits. A South Korean shipyard worker earns roughly $35,000, but labor is only 15 to 20% of the total cost. The real issue is scale and supply chain. South Korean yards like Hyundai Heavy Industries or Daewoo Shipbuilding build ships assembly line style. They order steel by the millions of tons, locking in volume discounts. They have entire industrial ecosystems around them. Suppliers of engines, electronics, and propulsion systems are located within miles of the shipyard. They can turn around a hull in 18 months because every step is optimized. American yards don't have that ecosystem anymore. When a US shipyard needs a specific marine diesel engine, they often have to import it, paying tariffs and shipping costs. When they need specialized steel, it comes from overseas because domestic steel mills stopped producing marine-grade plate decades ago. It's a vicious cycle. Without volume, suppliers leave. Without suppliers, costs go up. Without competitive costs, there's no volume. So, who exactly are the last survivors of American commercial shipbuilding? If you're looking for a cargo ship being built in America today, you're looking at a very short list. There's Philly Shipyard in Pennsylvania. They build tankers and container ships, but only for the Jones Act market. In 2022, they delivered two 3,600 TEU container ships to Matson, the Hawaiian shipping line. Those ships cost roughly $418 million combined, or about $209 million each. Compare that to the $140 million international price. Matson had no choice. If they want to ship containers from California to Hawaii, U.S. law requires American-built ships. Then there's General Dynamics NASSCO in San Diego. They build tankers and a few cargo ships, again, almost exclusively for the protected domestic market. And there's Austal USA in Mobile, Alabama, which builds smaller high-speed aluminum vessels, mostly for the military. These yards survive because of the Jones Act. Without it, they would be gone. But here's the cruel irony. The Jones Act, the law designed to save American shipbuilding, has actually killed the commercial maritime industry it was meant to protect. By creating a small, expensive captive market, it ensured that American yards would never achieve the scale needed to compete globally. It's economic protectionism that protects almost nothing, but here's where we need to give credit where it's due. The American shipyards that remain are engineering marvels. Newport News Shipbuilding is the only facility on Earth capable of building nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut builds Virginia-class submarines that are the most advanced underwater vessels ever made. These are not simple boxes. They are floating cities with nuclear reactors, advanced radar systems, and weapons platforms. The skill level required to build a nuclear carrier far exceeds what's needed for a container ship, so it's not that American workers can't build ships. It's that they've been directed to build the most complex, expensive ships in the world, leaving the commodity market, the bread-and-butter cargo ships, to Asia. This was a strategic choice. After World War II, the US government decided that maintaining a military shipbuilding advantage was more important than maintaining a commercial one. Subsidies flowed to naval contracts. The commercial side was left to fend for itself, and it couldn't. But the real proof of this strategic abandonment came during the 2021 supply chain crisis. When container ships were stuck outside Los Angeles and Long Beach, when shipping rates hit $20,000 per container, American companies didn't call American shipyards to order new vessels. They called South Korea. Matson placed an order with Philly Shipyard, yes, but only because they legally had to for Jones Act routes. Every other major American company, Walmart, Amazon, Target, they didn't even consider U.S. yards. They went straight to Hyundai, Daewoo, and the Chinese state shipbuilders. It wasn't even a question. During a national crisis when supply chains were the top political issue, the idea of building ships domestically wasn't even on the table. That tells you everything about the state of the industry. It's not dormant, it's extinct. But perhaps the most surprising factor that cemented this decline wasn't economics or regulation, but a technological shift that American yards completely missed. In the 1980s, shipbuilding went modular. Instead of building a ship piece by piece on a dry dock, Asian yards began constructing massive hull sections in climate-controlled factories, then assembling them like Lego blocks. This method, called block construction, cut production time in half and dramatically improved quality. American yards, focused on military contracts with different requirements, didn't make the investment. By the time they realized modular construction was the future, the Asian yards had a 20-year head start. Catching up would require billions in capital investment, and no private company was willing to make that bet. The US government could have stepped in, the way South Korea and China did, but it didn't. Naval shipbuilding was the priority. Commercial shipbuilding was left to die quietly. But to think of this as purely a loss is to misunderstand the global division of labor that emerged. The United States didn't lose shipbuilding by accident. It traded it. In exchange for allowing Asian countries to dominate shipbuilding, the US maintained dominance in other areas: software, finance, aerospace, and entertainment. South Korea builds the ships. America builds the operating systems, the logistics software, the satellite networks that track those ships. It's a trade-off, but it's also a vulnerability. During COVID, when supply chains broke, the United States realized it had outsourced not just the ships, but the knowledge of how to build them. If a war disrupted Asian shipyards, the US couldn't quickly rebuild a merchant fleet. The shipyards are gone. The suppliers are gone. The workers with those skills have retired. You can't just restart an industry that's been dead for 40 years. There have been efforts to revive it. In 2021, the Biden administration announced the Maritime Administration's Tanker Security Program, pledging subsidies to US-built tankers. In 2023, there was talk of expanding the Jones Act, or offering tax credits for domestic shipbuilding. But every proposal runs into the same wall. The cost gap is too large. Even with subsidies, an American-built cargo ship costs double what an Asian one does, and shipping companies operate on thin margins. They will always choose the cheaper option, unless the law forces them not to. So, the only ships built in America are the ones the law mandates. And that market is small, stagnant, and incapable of supporting a real industrial base. Look at the numbers. In 2023, the global shipbuilding order book included over 5,400 vessels. Of those, fewer than 20 were commercial ships ordered from US yards, and almost all were Jones Act vessels. The international market, the vast ocean of bulk carriers, tankers, LNG ships, and container ships, placed exactly 0 orders with American shipbuilders. The world has moved on. And American yards, trapped in a high-cost, low-volume cycle, can't follow. But there is one area where American shipbuilding is making a comeback, and it's not cargo ships. It's offshore wind installation vessels. These are specialized ships with massive cranes designed to install wind turbines in the ocean. Because of the Jones Act, any offshore wind farm in U.S. waters requires American-built installation vessels. Companies like Dominion Energy have placed orders with U.S. yards for these ships, and they're paying a premium. Each vessel costs upwards of $500 million, but the market exists because the law creates it. It's the same cycle. Protect the industry, inflate the costs, ensure it never competes globally. So, what does the future hold? The unfortunate answer is more of the same. American shipyards will continue building naval vessels, the occasional Jones Act tanker, and niche specialized ships. But the dream of the US building commercial cargo ships for the global market is over. The infrastructure is gone, the supply chain is gone. The cost gap is unbridgeable, without subsidies so large they would be politically impossible. China, South Korea, and Japan have spent decades perfecting the art of building ships fast and cheap. They have the scale, the expertise, and the government backing. The US chose a different path. It chose to dominate the high end, the warships and submarines, and let the rest go. That was a rational strategic decision in the 1970s. But it means that today, if you want to ship a container across the Pacific, the vessel carrying it will be built in Asia. And if you want it any other way, you'll need to change the entire structure of global trade. Ultimately, the story of American shipbuilding isn't really about ships. It's about what happens when an industry loses the will to compete. The Jones Act was supposed to protect American shipyards, but instead it turned them into a museum piece, kept alive by legal mandate rather than market demand. The skills, the supply chains, the economies of scale, all migrated to Asia, and they aren't coming back. We live in an era where we expect goods to arrive cheap and fast. To achieve that, the world needed shipyards that could build vessels at a fraction of the cost. America chose not to be one of those shipyards. It was a trade-off, and the cost is now clear. The next time you see a container ship pulling into port, take a moment to look at the hull. You'll see names like Hyundai, Daewoo, or Costco. You won't see a single American yard's name. Because in the global economy, we don't build the ships anymore, we just load them.